It's Ergo Summit. We're thrilled to have you here for Tim's second session titled Job Rotation. Are we doing the right thing? If you weren't able to make it to his first talk, which he had at 2:30 earlier today, if you were there, you know that Tim has over 32 years of experience in ergonomics and has worked with countless companies to improve workplace safety and productivity. But for me, what really makes listening to Tim special, and I said this in the last one, is after you listen to him talk, you'll never look at things the same way again. But before we get started, I just want to let you know if you have any questions you'd like to ask Tim, please feel free to add those into the chat. And as they come up, I'll bring them to Tim's attention and we can address them in that moment. Also, in the chat, you can find our contact information. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about the Ergo Summit as a whole or any questions about safety nights. So with that being said, I'm going to stop talking and let the guy known as the Ergo Tim take it over from here. Tim, it's all yours.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Just a little bit of background that I grew up on a Kansas cattle ranch. So if you weren't on earlier, I've been working and doing things since before I can remember practically. And the bovine that you see behind me, his name is Reject. He was a twin. His mom wouldn't claim him, so we had to feed him, bucket feed him. And all I will say is that he was good, like really good. And then photo on the left, this is more recent, summer of 2022. I led a scouting adventure, high adventure along Lake Superior shoreline. We backpacked nearly 30 miles. And yesterday was the anniversary of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. If you know the Gordon Lightfoot song, if you don't know it, it's worth a listen. But the storms along Lake Superior really do whip up and nothing flat. We were power washed. That was the only shower we had all week. So it's a little bit rougher than normal. But let's go ahead and jump into the session talking about job rotation. Are we doing the right thing? To do that, I'm going to let you know a little bit about what's going on with ergonomics. Talk about some traditional job rotation of fatigue failure and what we can do, what we need to do as far as prevention through design. I know I talked about it a little bit in the last session, but not everybody may be here on they've heard of then. So when we talk about ergonomics, what we're trying to do is design things for safe, efficient, and comfortable human use. We want people of various sizes, shapes, and the capabilities to be able to work in roughly and do the same thing, do the same things, work with the same processes, same equipment. We want to adjust the equipment. We want to design the equipment for the person, not ask people to adapt. And this is a slide I like to use when I talk about designing things for other people. This is a shot I took about a year and a half ago at the Styrian Armory in Graz, Austria. My daughter decided to spend the academic year studying there. So for spring break, we made a trek to Austria. Graz is a great city, great, easy to maneuver city. But if you can sort of see the suits of armor, they had thousands and thousands of suits of armor because this was the Styrian Armory, and Napoleon was knocking on the door, and you had all through over the ages you had issues, but as you can see, they're made of different sizes, and the one on the front left is somebody's a little bit shorter, stouter. You've got the one in the middle, somebody's a little bit thinner, not so tall, and the one on the right, a little bit taller, a little bit stouter. Again, but the thing is, they only made 3 different sizes. So for the people they would conscript or try to get to fight in the wars. Now, if you were wealthy or the head honcho, then you could afford to have your own custom fit. But again, they were at least thinking about ergonomics and thinking about the sizes of people way back then. And then we'll talk about a little bit about risk factors. Again, we're dealing with lack of positions, and that's one of the big challenges that we're seeing is with ergonomics is more of a posture. You see here, they've got extended reach, awkward posture, the wrinkles, got wrinkles there in the wrist, you got contact stress along the edge. This is not a good setup, so we want to be concerned about this. Now, if we look at what's going on with injuries and illnesses. I think this is really important slide, because we see about 40% of the frequency, i.e. number of cases, about 40% of the severity, i.e. dollar cost, in musculoskeletal disorders that are days away cases that result in time away. And those are some big numbers. I like to talk about this whenever we get the chance, because the financial impact is pretty great. We look at the average case cost, about $25,000. The deductible for most people's workers' comp policies is about $250,000. So that means most ergo cases don't hit that deductible. And that means that comes out of the company's pockets. You got to find the money somewhere. Money doesn't grow on trees. It comes out of an organization's profit margin. So if you say your organization has a 10% margin, then you have to sell another $250,000 worth of products or services, whatever, to earn the money to pay for that one claim. So that's really important to keep in mind. If we start looking at the opioid epidemic, we see soft tissue disorders as key contributors. We see more women affected. We see public healthcare policy incentivizing healthcare providers to manage pain, and they're financially incentivized, because the better the pain scores, the more money they get reimbursed. So it incentivizes healthcare providers to actually throw more painkillers at people, and that's a challenge. So that's a whole other talk. We have lots of issues with the MSD accelerators, such as gender, obesity, fatigue, and lack of sleep. Again, I talked earlier that women are more susceptible, and I'm not sure why that is, but what we're trying to do is protect the people. We want to get ahead of things. Now, in the U.S., there are several ergonomics requirements, believe it or not. Now, federal OSHA has what's called the General Duty Clause, and that's where it's sort of generally written, but workplaces are required to address recognized hazards, i.e., if you know people are getting hurt doing this job, this affects the shoulders, then it's a recognized hazard. You need to do something about it. Minnesota has a new ergonomic standard that just went into effect early the first of the year. Affects healthcare facilities, warehouse distribution centers, and meatpacking and poultry processors. Now, warehouses and meatpacking and poultry processing, they're at 100 employee threshold, but healthcare facilities don't have that 100 employee threshold. So got to make sure that. So if you're in any of those industries, let me know. We can help you out. But that is something. If you're in Minnesota and you have those sorts of operations, it's real important to consider. California is a whole other world. You got the Injury and Illness Prevention Program standard, and that's requiring companies to conduct assessments of all claims-related incidents. So whether it's ergonomics or not, if somebody gets hurt and you're not doing an assessment, you need to be. They've got an ergonomics program standards for general industry. It's about a page and a half. Generally, if two people are doing a similar job and they had a similar diagnosed injury within a 12-month rolling period, then that triggers the standard. Now, by 12-month rolling period, I mean it's not January 1st to December 31st. It's any time within a 12-month rolling period. So, for example, if I have an injury on December 31st, this coming December 31st, because I don't know what I'm doing. Say I'm typing and I have a shoulder issue because my mouse is too far away, and my coworker has a similar issue, doing a similar job on January 1st. That triggers that standard, because it's, again, not the calendar year. They also have a suitable seating standard, which requires seating to be made available where it's possible to be seated, and that standard is very, very, very generally nebulously worded. It's very difficult to understand and manage. So that's why it's always okay to get some help, to ask for help on some of this stuff. And then last week I was in California working with clients, helping them comply with. They literally have an occupationally specific hotel housekeeper, and this is a mouthful. Musculoskeletal Injury Prevention Program standard. I call it the MIP. requires annual training, annual assessments of all housekeeping tasks. Pretty interesting. Maine, state of Maine requires computer workstation training. A lot of states have patient handling requirements. In New Hampshire, again, requires evaluations of all incidences of ergonomically related injuries. Now, obviously, New Hampshire doesn't have quite as much industry as some of the other states, but again, these are things to be aware of. But it's just not in the U.S. that we see this stuff. Brazil has ergonomics requirements, and the sort of interesting thing is based on your gender and age. They also have specific material handling requirements or limitations. Mexico requires everybody to do assessments, find the risk factors, look at material handling. And the UK, it's their ergonomic standard or efforts are focused mainly on computer workstations. And the European Union, and I've done a lot of work overseas, is making sure that hazard assessments of jobs are completed for all jobs. Looking at safety, machine guarding, ergonomics, industrial hygiene. I did a lot of work back in the day in a prior life in the EU. There's just and around the world. Those are some of my coworkers said. She put it pretty well. Some of my best work paid vacations. We had some, generally if we were doing a longer trip, we had some time off, and we got to explore the area. And if you're ever in Sydney, make sure you go to the Museum at the Rocks. It talks about how the prisoner ships were brought in and some of the stuff, some of that history. So I'm a history buff, and it's really cool. All right, so we start talking about job rotation in specifics. And I guess the thing is, Smith in 1981 said, a change in task is comparable to taking a break. Well, yes and no. We have to think about it. We're going to look into a little bit more detail. And Dr. Collins, he was my on my master's committee at Kansas State. And Collins always said, as long as the change did not require a person to perform a similar task, we can rotate. If we rotate from a task using that's similar, or using the same body parts, we're really not gaining anything by job rotation. We're going to be talking about that. Now, however, Collins said, but if you can implement a good rotation schedule, then the jobs feel more equitable, reduce boredom or psychological fatigue. And also if you have a good rotation project and good training, as long as, job grades and stuff aren't being mixed up, then you have a workforce that has the right skills. So if somebody's out for one reason or another, you can plug somebody into that job. Collins passed away about 10 or 12 years ago. Really, really interesting fellow. He always told a really bad joke at the beginning of every lecture. I won't do that unless we have time. So if you don't ask questions at the end, I'm going to start telling jokes. So traditional job rotation is, rotating people, moving people between jobs. And the goal is to move people, the thought process, move people from a high stress job to a lower stress job to try to alleviate some of the stress from the person working that high stress job for an extended period. The challenge is it's not a magic wand. And actually, I've been looking for that magic ergonomics wand for a long time, haven't found it. When the Harry Potter books and movies came out, I thought we were there, but no luck. But anyway, so there's no magic wand. So the challenges we see are we have to use a different part of the body if we're going to be rotating from one task to another. And have to rotate on a higher level. Now, job rotation isn't just for physical issues, it's also for cognitive issues. So if I have a very highly visually intense task, I need to rotate a lot more frequently from a cognitive standpoint. Think about it the next time you're standing in a long line waiting to get through airport security. Those are the screeners. That's a very highly intense visual task, high stakes task as well. And you notice they rotate about every 30 minutes. So those are things. And sometimes what we're finding from a fatigue failure standpoint, i.e. wear on tissues and joints of the body, is that a high risk job can sometimes still be too high that we don't want to move somebody through. So let's see if we can get this to play. There's the Tacoma Narrows disaster in the 40s. So it's not. I was hoping to get the video to play. That's not going for us. Whoops. But anyway, so that's not going. We need to go back to our script. But then what happened was the bridge was not designed properly to stabilize it. So when the wind got going, the bridge, the roadbed started swaying and doing this. And so finally, the materials gave way. The stress limit was reached, even though it was below the stress limit. It was repeated loadings of the material. So it's sort of like when you kink a garden hose over and over time, you can see the failure, and then eventually the material breaks. We generally see this in the shoulders, upper extremities, and with lifting tasks. And so I'm finding that there's a few tools out there that I've been working with that help us to look at what's going on in the body. Because in the bridge example, we're looking at an inanimate object. With the body, researchers were looking to see whether it was the same thing, whether the human body would be subject to fatigue failure. They did a lot of studies using lab mice, rats, etc., and then with living organisms. And the challenge, though, with rotation is, again, we talked about just briefly rotating people from low risk job to high risk job, etc., etc. So we have 3 jobs. One's a very high risk, one's a medium risk, one's a lower risk. Then we have to look at all the jobs in the cycle from fatigue failure standpoint. And the challenge is that since the damage is exponential, not linear, even though we might be rotating from a high risk job through 2 lower risk jobs, we might still only at the end of the day bring all those jobs, that person everybody instead of one person may be at high risk for injury or illness. And that's a challenge. I think that's what a lot of folks are missing with job rotation, is they think, oh, well, we'll just do job rotation and we'll be done with it and we'll be fine. No, you can't do that. You just can't use that as a panacea. So here's some info on a job I actually reviewed a couple of years ago, and they were doing the horizontal pusher pull. It was about a 45-inch lever arm, so they're reaching 45 inches to make an 11-pound push of a tote across the conveyor to a takeaway conveyor. If you see that, what we found is the actual order of magnitude of risk for an injury and medical intervention needed in a year's time was over 90%. And sometimes when I get a chance to do in the class, I'll mock up this job and just let people think about the effects on the body. And what we're getting here is that reach, that extended reach, because they're pretty much laying the cells across the conveyors. The ironic thing is these are full totes, but I love that. But in the picking operation, because they were doing a fulfillment job, the empty totes were being pushed onto the conveyor where they're picking by mechanical means. So they already had the technology, the equipment, they just weren't using it to help once the person was done picking that tote. So that was pretty fascinating, a little frustrating as well. So here we got another horizontal pusher pull. See if we can, if we got another job, we've got the lever arm, we dropped down to 20 inches, load 11 pounds, about 375 times. That's not a bad job, about 25% risk for injury. And then if we take another look, say, okay, what do we do if we take that lower job and we'll say, okay, here we go. We're going to have, instead of 750 times for the 45-inch reach, we're dropping that to 375. And we drop that other job, there's a 25% risk. We're still at a high, almost 80% risk for an injury. So we've reduced the worst job a little bit, but we've really escalated the risk to that other lower, what used to be the lower risk job. So we've gone from having one high risk job of one low risk job to 2 high risk jobs. So that's something that we really have to be careful of. Now think about it. It's it's difficult to do something like this 1,000 times a shift or however many. And one of the things I look at is just look at the grimace on the guy's face. It's a lot of he's doing some sort of electronic assembly, but just look at that. You can just see by his facial expression. That's a good way to look to see if people have problems doing a particular job. We keep taking another look at an upper extremity issue. So we've taken the cumulative damage again 1,000 times a day. We're saying he said the hard expression. Gosh. So we've got a high risk. That would be what he was doing, say. And then we look at a lower risk job where it's not, somewhat easy, 1,000 times a day. Okay, that's pretty decent. We're in the 30% risk. But then if we say, okay, we'll rotate from A to B. Now, again, we've got both jobs high risk. So those are some, I just call them academic examples, but coming up pretty soon, this is actually real life. A project I'm in the middle of working on. Hopefully we'll wrap it up this week, but I can't really share the operations or stuff with you. But the red is high risk. The gray is moderately high risk. The yellow is sort of a caution, and the green is, well, okay, we're pretty okay. We looked at it from we're looking at these jobs from a hand wrist standpoint to a shoulder arm standpoint. We're looking at them, looking at departments and the various cells. And it's pretty difficult, except if you go down look at the top line, the top table, that's going to be difficult to really affect a decent rotation schedule, because we're either red or pretty much gray on most jobs. And the challenge on the top table is the jobs to the right, the 3 jobs to the right, 3 columns. They are jobs that don't have, they're sort of side jobs or support functions. So they really don't have enough work for somebody to do those 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And this is a multi-shift operation. So those are more support and getting parts ready. And it's actually pretty fast operations. So if we look at the third table down, they're basically 3 primary operations they rotate through in that cell, and there's just not much we can do. Rotation, they rotate around, but again, not everybody's qualified. This is a higher skilled job, a lot more complex machinery, a lot more complex testing. And then down at the bottom, again, there's some red, and this might be the area that we have a little bit more chance to rotate people amongst the jobs. But again, from a shoulder arm standpoint, might be a little bit easier. We have a little bit more wiggle room with the hand wrist. That might be somewhere where we can affect some job rotation. Again, it's just, if you caught my talk earlier, one of the things I found is we don't always have a good classical textbook, black and white, yes, no, go, or no go answer. That's the challenge with ergonomics today. It's an art, it's a science, and sometimes we do the best we can do, and sometimes we provide answers that folks don't necessarily want to hear, but I think that it's real important to look at these jobs before you throw people into a rotational schedule. Look at them from a fatigue failure standpoint, and to see, are we really going to gain something from rotating people, or could we potentially make the issue worse? So those are the big things I think to consider. So what do we do? Again, that's where on-site assessments and what I would call a detailed quantitative analysis is necessary. What are the risks? What are the reaches? What are the demands of the job? And what parts of the body are at risk? And that's where you've got the awareness going on, teaching and training employees. Hey, here are some places where you self-inflict risk factors. Looking at your engineers and team training. One of the things I see lacking is a focus and an emphasis on the design of new equipment and looking at it from an ergonomics perspective. A lot of your mechanical design engineers, for them in academic settings, ergonomics courses are another engineering elective. They're engineering, but coming out of engineering school myself, and I went through the IE route, I wasn't going to take another engineering course if I had an elective where I could take a social sciences or something else. Frankly, that's just the way it is. So that's a challenge. So that's why it's important for engineers to have some ergonomics training. Generally, I like when I do it, I come in for about a day to prep and see what's going on in the operation, how they're doing stuff, and then about a day of classroom and on out in the floor time. And that's where we get into the prevention through design. Let's start looking at pieces of equipment and processes while they're still in the design stage, before the metal's cut, before any bolts are turned, whatever, so that we can try to design out any of these issues before anything is put into place permanently. And one of the things I mentioned is that analysis is easy. I can go in, I can analyze Rula, Reba, strain index, I can use NIOSH, I can use this, I can use that. I can analyze stuff out the wazoo. The challenge is, what do we do with that? Developing fixes is the tough part. How do we solve this issue? And that's I think where a lot of your outfits, and I throw some hand grenades here. That's where the outfits selling the virtual or video driven analysis systems. I mean, they're all good and fine. They can do a decent job of looking at the postural issues, sometimes picking up on the frequency. But there's no way to measure the force to move a 1,200-pound roll of craft paper through a television screen or a camera lens. And B, they're not going to go down and ask employees, well, why do you do this? How are you doing it? And come up with fixes, because fixes aren't easy, and you can't do that through a camera lens. So covered quite a bit of ground this afternoon. Appreciate it, and appreciate your time. So what kinds of questions? Like I said, if I don't have questions, I'm gonna start telling jokes. So I guess the first one is, my brother's telling me that, was it people eat a lot more bananas than monkeys? It's true, because when was the last time you ate a monkey? So yeah, that was a bad one, I know.
Clearly everybody understood the assignment. They wanted him stand up at the end of this.
Pardon?
Everybody, I think we decided there was gonna be no questions, so we could listen to your stand up.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, no. Tim, thank you again so much. I know this was your second session today. Mm-hmm. And so on top of, we do have a question that just came in.
All right.
In the chat. So Ellison is asking, Tim, what do employers do when you deliver the news that task rotation / job rotation doesn't work?
I use data to help them understand that. And, my job isn't necessarily to tell clients what they want to hear. My job is to tell them what they need to hear. And I just use as much data as available as I can, as much data. Another question: what do you see the future of ergo being like the next 10 years with robotics? I think there's always going to be a human element. How we are interacting. I would say though that I got a really good buddy from college who works in the realm of automation and robotics and stuff. Really, really, really smart guy. And there's a certain cost barrier to having a lot of robotics. If I'm doing millions of parts a year, then I can automate. I can use the robots, the cobots, a lot more intensively. But frankly, I go into so many operations. It's not the sterile manufacturing operations we might see on a TV show. It's down and dirty. Companies running at a low margin. They're not going to be able to afford robotics. Frankly, there's still going to be a human element for a long time to come. So I think that's a good way to sort of close out is there's always going to be a need for a person. In a lot of jobs, we're not going to automate people out. It's not going to happen anytime soon. And the question though is, so given that, how do we do the best we can do to give people a safe and comfortable work environment, or as safe as possible, as comfortable as possible. I'm not talking, lazy boy recliner comfortable, but the kind of job where we're not beating people's bodies to death every day.
Looks like Allison has another question. Do you have any experience with exoskeleton?
I mean, I haven't used them per se. The challenge with exoskeletons and from folks I've talked to, worked with, who are working with them, is one size does not fit all. There's going to be a different fit. We have to look at what the use is. Are we using them as a true exoskeleton? Is one where we would step into it and we would be sort of like Iron Man. And that's true. And so with Iron Man, then we have to say, okay, are we letting our muscles deteriorate because we're not using them because the machine is doing all the work? The other piece is, if I have, say, a shoulder upper body mounted harness type exoskeleton, and to help me with lifting or something, those forces have to go somewhere. They just don't magically disappear. So there's always going to be, am I placing stress on my hips, on my lower legs, my lower extremities? Where are those forces being transmitted? They don't go away. It's basic physics. So so we have to be very careful. For exoskeletons, I think right now the best use are things like rehabilitation. I'm on the assistant administrator of the ergonomics practice specialty for ASSP. We're doing a talk with Matt Marino in January he's in a webinar called Exoskeletons in Rehabilitation. He has a son with cerebral palsy that they've been using exoskeletons for him to be able to walk and get around. Absolutely, I think that's where we should start with, is in the medical field. I know outfits like Boeing and some of the beverage companies are really testing and doing a lot of research, but we really haven't seen the results of a lot of that research. So I would say somebody in Jolie says beware of what the exoskeleton manufacturers are trying to sell. Same thing with wearables. Buyer beware. What are you really getting? Are you getting? And the thing is, if your company purchases say a wearable, and you're collecting all this data, and it says you have issues, bam, you have now identified or recognized hazards. You're obligated under general duty to do something about it with it. Now, you should anyway, but now that there's data, it's incontrovertible, and it's best practice. It's good economics to actually address the ergonomics issues. But once you have that data, you there are legal obligations on you, not only as a company, but as an individual manager or professional, to address those. And I think the other thing is, again, using as Allison's saying, using the equipment. Are they using it? Are they not using the equipment? So again, there's no magic answer, but buyer beware, and make sure you know what you're doing. So great questions. That was great. They didn't want to hear me tell jokes.
After they heard the first one and they're like, you know what, we have questions now.
Yep, exactly. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thank you again. Also, if anybody has any additional questions, if you think about something after this is over, please feel free to reach out. Tim's contact and my contact info are at the top of the chat, so please feel free to use it. But Tim, thank you again. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And tomorrow we continue the summit at 12 p.m. Eastern with Abby. She's going to dive into the hidden ergo resources that are out there and available for you to use. So thank you again for everybody. And I look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow.
Thanks, Dan. Take care.
Have a good day, everyone. Bye, Tim.
Bye.